welcome to episode 381 of Cinematary. I'm your host, Zach Dennis, and I'm here with...
Jesse.
Seth Troyer.
Michael O'Malley.
In today's episode, we'll be talking about movies that we saw this week in part 1. And in part 2, we'll be continuing our cinematic journey through the Bible with 1998's The Prince of Egypt, which will take us into the story of Moses.
I did not realize that was 1998. Holy shit.
Oh, yeah.
I felt like it was more recent than that, but oof.
Right on the millennium.
I was reading, actually, that this was the first DreamWorks movie in production.
Wait, really?
Mm-hmm. Ants.
I thought Shrek was first.
No, Ants came out first because Prince of Egypt got delayed a little bit, but it was the first one, like, when they started DreamWorks to come over.
When did The Road to El Dorado
When did
hit?
Shrek come out? What?
I don't know. But that's...
I'm so confused. I thought Shrek was like 97 or something.
Shrek
That
came
was
out
like 2001. Because it played in
We just did a
competition
whole
at
month, but
Cannes
I know exactly when Shrek came out. It came out in 2001, so...
It competed at Cannes with Mulholland Drive. I remember reading that one.
Yeah, so...
It got
a
snubbed.
nice little fun fact. But head over... Before we start, head over to cinematary.com. We talked about it last week, but if you did not read Michael's magnum opus on Noah, please go to cinematary.com and check it out. We also have reviews of The French Dispatch and Labyrinth of Cinema. But yeah, let's go ahead and jump into movies that we saw this week. I'm going to kick it off with a new release, and that is the latest. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago with Paul Verhoeven when we talked about Starship Troopers, but his latest movie, Benedetta, came out recently. Started kind of going wide over the past week. But it takes place in the late 17th century. You have the Black Plague ravaging the land, and Benedetta Carlini joins a convent in Pescia, Tuscany, and she is a novice. And then she's even from an early age, she kind of like has this ability to perform miracles. And then as she grows a little older, she meets this other what's the Bartolomea. She meets this other woman named Bartolomea who, they like to have fun. They like to have some like naked fun, as nuns. That's just what happens.
They do.
Just gals being pals.
Just gals being pals at the convent.
And she has all these crazy dreams about Jesus. And how she's getting married to Jesus, and Jesus saves her with a sword and kills all these CGI snakes.
There's a lot of Jesus dreams. Yeah. Seth, what did you make of Benedetta?
I thought it was awesome. It's dirty and naughty, and it's like there was no way I wasn't gonna like enjoy it because it's like medieval setting. It's got like religious baggage, and it's real sexy. So like that's basically me, and I just really appreciated that it was just kind of gratuitous, and it was just kind of like an old-fashioned like exploitation movie kind of. It was just like going for it, and it didn't give a shit. It felt like some kind of outgrowth of like The Devils by what's that guy's name?
I can't remember, but
Ken Russell.
Ken Russell.
The Tommy guy. Ken Russell, yeah. It felt more like that. It felt like something that came out in the 70s that was just like, there's going to be dirty stuff, and it's going to just keep coming, and it's going to make God mad. It's going to make your mom mad. But it is all based off of, like, I was surprised that he definitely takes some crazy liberties, but a lot of it is like based off of accounts from these nunneries that were documenting this particular woman who did have lesbian relations, did like have like a whole like stigmata like hoax like going on where she was like, I am talking to Jesus, he's talking to me. It's like there was all kinds of stuff. I was surprised at how true to the story it was because it was just so outrageous.
I wonder, yeah, I'm really curious how historically accurate it is, like how much of that. I mean, so pretty much exactly what they show, like all of her. And then even the fact that at the end they say that the plague never hit. What's the name of the town? Pescia? Pescia?
Yeah. So I looked at it, and at the end, the plague totally hits. It does. And she does eventually get put in jail and whatnot. I don't know why. The last little, bunch of text is kind of the most inaccurate, it seems, which I wouldn't have expected. But a lot of the other stuff, she's got, a wiki page. And a lot of the other stuff, all her visions and all that, there was more they could have put in, of all, her crazy, visions and things she was trying and claiming. And they did not, as far as I know, they did not make a dildo out of Mary Magdalene statue. But
they never...
Hey, it
I
could
feel like
have
the first scene, maybe not the very first scene where she had that Mary Magdalene, or is it Virgin Mary?
It's the Virgin Mary. It's the Virgin Mary.
When she's a kid, I didn't think anything of it, but the first scene where she brings it out and sits it on her table, I'm like, she's gonna use that. They're gonna fuck with that, and I was so glad I was right.
You have the sight.
I just had a feeling. Yeah, it's definitely got the unhinged horniness of the devils, but I don't know. To me, I really liked it too. I guess I still haven't quite wrapped my head around how much I like it, because there are things about it, things that I wish that they would have, when they would seed a certain thread, I wish they would have continued it. They had a lot of the vision things at the beginning, and I kind of wanted them to have more throughout, but it sort of stops after a certain point. And same with the miracles. I almost wanted it to play up more of she's got this weird supernatural connection to Mary, and Mary can help her do miracles. I was kind of hoping they were going to take almost a Carrie angle to it, where she's got this weird connection and some crazy stuff happens, and that's why everybody thinks she's got her powers. But
yeah, the third act is really awesome, but it feels like it's just going a million miles a second, and it's not keeping up with all the threads in the first part. I agree.
And I liked, I don't know, to me it was just kind of an interesting, I don't know if I totally know what the message of it is, but it kind of had me down some interesting thought spirals thinking about how, this is all she knew. This is all she was raised in. So this, her only real context of the world is through the lens of Christianity as a woman, and as a woman who, has had very, very little sex education. So, the way that she thinks about God, they tell her, or Jesus, they tell her that Jesus is her husband, and she is his bride. And she knows very little about, what sex actually is, but she probably still feels sexual arousal. And so she's got this image of a bride and groom relationship, and she's feeling a sexual arousal and thinks that that's how she's supposed to feel, and doesn't really have anybody to pedal back that idea either, because I think they just don't talk about sex at all. When you think about what she lives in, the very limited worldview that she has, and then this woman comes and she has a pleasurable experience, and she starts to think, well, if this was bad, I would feel bad about this, but I don't. So this must be okay with God. And then, it comes to this part of accusation where they're like, hey, you're doing all this stuff. And it's weird how she doesn't really deny it, but she doesn't really own it either. She just says, I just loved her just like God loves her. There's nothing wrong with this. And it's she doesn't even register why they think it's sinful, because it doesn't make sense to her at all that it would be sinful. This is just loving. I don't know if I'm explaining exactly what I'm taking away from, but I just thought it was a really interesting idea. This frame point of never even conceiving homosexuality as being anything other than just a very innocent and pure love. That it doesn't even make sense why that would register as inappropriate or sinful. And they all, every other character clearly sees it that way, but it's she just doesn't even register it.
Well, yeah, her motives and her inner life is left very opaque. And that's probably my favorite part of the whole movie, other than the CGI snakes, is that we like really don't know at the end of the day, like, is it a hoax to her? Does she like all the like miracles and stuff? Is she just using the other girl that she's with, like, or does she actually have like true feelings for her? We don't really get like a scene with her just by herself where she's like, yeah, I'm gonna get them. They're all fooled, or like, oh, what a stupid bitch. You know, she doesn't know what she's talking about. Like, to the end, until the very end, she's like more mysterious than like any of the other characters to me, even though she's the main character.
And all the characters, I don't know, they all have like very strong and specific views on the way that they take in Christianity, and they all think that they're extremely right. And yeah, I mean, I think that's always been the frustrating thing for me, like growing up evangelical and kind of moving away from it, is just that there's just that the way that it just never has made any sense to me, even when I was growing up, that like each different sect can think this is exactly how it must be and everybody else is doing it wrong. But then you got this guy in the background with his, I mean, obviously it's like his concubine or something, and she's like showing everybody her juicy nipple in the movie, and then, you know, you see this one character who is like absolutely sure, like, no, I don't care what happens to me, she is lying and I must bring the truth forth. You know, and then you have Benedetta, who is just like, look, I don't know what to tell you, Jesus talks to me directly, I am right and y'all are idiots. Everybody's just so sure of himself.
Or Benedetta is posing like she's sure of herself and just doing it
but we don't know.
Survive, basically. Like, even at the end where she's like, if you burn me at the stake, like, the plague will come. Like, it's that's a good prank that saves your life for sure.
I'm also really curious about that like demonic voice that she uses. I wonder if it's the actresses or if they got like a voiceover for it. I don't know. I liked it, and I liked too, like, the erotic scenes too. They're very titillating.
Yeah, the early ones like at the beginning are like genuinely sweet.
Yeah,
actually.
And very titillating. Like with the whole, they use that sheer curtain, and there's a real chemistry, I think, there, and I always appreciate like really well done erotic scenes in movies. I don't know.
Yeah, I think this is the other girl's like first movie or something. The Other Nun. I didn't
love it, but I did think it was really good and had me kind of thinking, I don't know, had some interesting ideas to me.
Yeah, I'll just come in with some cold water. I think it's fine. I think we have such a low bar for eroticism in movies now. Like, it's really not that spicy in relation, like, just in general. Like, I mean, you can, I don't know. To me, the sex scenes had about the same expression as like Googling lesbian sex on, or it's just kind of going with that. Like, you know, Verhoeven, who's somebody who is established at a degree of kind of satire and is able to kind of like probe these issues in an interesting way. This one is just kind of infatuated with this kind of you know, this whole idea of the plague and you know, these kind of modern day connotations to that. But it really has nothing to say about Benedetta and her relationship with not only the woman, but also you know, her as the bride of Christ. It kind of just like it kind of introduces all of these things and just kind of leaves them at, you know, but doesn't really ever close the loop. And so you have all of these things that are kind of interesting that you're like, oh, like if we actually engage with this, it'd be pretty interesting. But instead it just kind of does it, and it kind of provokes you with, oh, well, here's nudity, or here's a, you know, kind of graphic sex scene, or here's that, and it's just like, that's fine, but like, there also should be somewhat of a purpose behind it. Like, this is the reason why you're kind of doing this. And I never felt like it was the movie, I guess, never felt very dangerous. You know, like, you watch The Devils, that's a very dangerous feeling movie. Like, you feel like you are watching something that you shouldn't be watching. And like in Benedetta, I never felt that way. It always felt very restrained to me in a way that it never felt like it truly pushed the envelope.
I definitely agree with the threads, the idea of like they leave a lot of threads that then they kind of don't follow through with on.
Yeah, I disagree with most of what you say, but I agree with the thread part, because but I think it's just like whether or not that bothers you is going to, because I agree that it's like kind of not saying much of anything, and I just personally was like, I'm cool with that. Let's just do some sacrilegious evil stuff and get out, kind of.
Yeah, but that's kind of like that's just kind of like the whole like thumbing, like making a face in the window, you know, just to be like there's it's just kind of boring to be provocative, just to be like, oh, like here's a boob, here's women having sex, you know, like
there's a lot of boobs in the movie.
Yeah, like at the end of the day, it's kind of like.
Though.
No, I mean, but at the end of the day, you're just kind of like, why are you being like, what is the point of being provocative? Like, again, like, we're in the internet age. If you want to go see some women have sex, you can go find women having sex. It's not that you can probably find nuns having sex. It's not that hard. So like, what are you doing? What are you doing to like kind of move forward a story? Since we are at the movie theater, Michael, we were trying to say something earlier.
It's so pointless to come back around to this comment because it was just going to be a dumb joke. But I was going to say, as someone who's not seen the movie, what I'm hearing from Zach is save my $12 and just invest in like a private, like a private browsing session on Google.
Yeah,
is that all I'm hearing?
It's very pointy how too at times. I think the sex is
just
like,
just
I carved this dildo. Let me show you how I can slip it in there, and then.
But it's out of like holy statues, right? It's pretty cool.
You know, it has that. It has these scenes where like, you know, shirtless Jesus is like, and those are kind of fun because those at least like have like like he's kind of trying to push something here. But for a lot of it is just like here's nudity. This is supposed to like be like, oh my god, and it's just kind of, I don't know. It has the level of it's about as provocative as an 8-year-old is.
Yeah, so. I doubt he's actually trying to like be a provocateur with the nudity a lot of the time. I think he's just really horny. I think he's just really obsessed with showing nudity. So he's just like, let's put more in there. I don't think he's like expecting anyone to be shocked by tits. I wouldn't think.
But we have such a low bar for nudity and eroticism in movies now, because we have like, you know, we have Barbie and Ken dolls in every movie. So,
which Jesus was a Ken doll in this one.
There is a thing in like medieval Christianity where like women, like if you look into some of the saints or whatever, like when they had their revelations from God or whatever, it was like a sexual experience. Like they would have like feelings of ecstasy and stuff like that. Does the movie get into any of that sort of thing?
There's definitely this connection between like her sexual awakenings and these visions that she has of Jesus, for sure. Because I mean, the way that Verhoeven frames them are kind of like these almost orgasmic moments.
Right. There was a movie that came out, I want to say last year, called Saint Maud, that was kind of about that concept in like a modern setting. Like, it wasn't an amazing movie, but it's something that I think goes like kind of, I feel like modern Christianity kind of like is like, okay, we don't talk about that sort of thing, but it was like a really established tradition for like several centuries about like these like female essentially like prophetesses who like would have like sexual encounters with the divine, more or less, and that's kind of wacky and interesting, I think, and we need more movies about that.
Well, this is one.
Well, Benedetta is It's in theaters now, so if you would like to go and enjoy that, it's out there. Seth, we need you to catch us up. You watched part 2 of Interface, and the people have been waiting.
The people have been waiting because I spoke about Interface Part 1, and I did a horrible job of describing what it's about, and I still don't know exactly what it's about. It's this animated series on YouTube called Interface, and it originally came out in these little snippets online, and now they are all compact into 2 parts. First part is 40 minutes, and this one that I just watched is an hour and 16 minutes, and it brings all the threads to and motifs to some sort of like climactic explosion of some sort. It's the continued adventures of this silent, strange man who follows around a pink clown who turns into various vehicles. And how they got that way is sort of a mystery, sort of a military experiment from World War II. But I was really impressed at how, again and again, this sort of like real cheap looking flash animation can sustain itself, and not just in a way that like it's like Adult Swim sort of like what the fuck sort of animation, which I feel like we are kind of like we've had more than enough of at this point. This really does feel like it's trying to use the strangeness and all these weird elements and actually build something like a real vibe, a real mood, a real atmosphere, and it's really trying to convey lots of strange things about like conspiracies and the way I don't know. Once I start talking about like the thematic elements, I just get lost because it's just a real strange net of things. And it's like I just go back to whenever I'm talking about it, like the central pink clown character who is sort of like the white rabbit that the character is following the whole time. Is he describes it as, and I think it works to describe the whole project, is that it's a mystery not to be solved but to be experienced. I guess that's all I'll say about Interface. You should watch it. It's a wonderful, independent little endeavor.
Oh, after last week, I'm definitely gonna try to watch those. They sounded wild. Did the clown
on the YouTube.com
is the clown thing, pink clown thing, show up again?
Yeah, he's all over the place.
All right. Well, speaking of pink clowns.
So I think Zach is referring to the movie I'm talking about, in which there are no pink clowns, but there
I don't
are
know.
pink
I don't
things,
know if there is.
like flowers.
Oh, that's too bad.
So last weekend I went and saw the new Disney animated feature Encanto, which is apparently their 60th animated feature, and good for them. I wish I would have hoped that after 60 features they would have learned how to tell a story better, but they apparently haven't.
Well, so wait, I'm sorry.
Damn.
Disney's 60th animated movie? They've only made 60 animated movies?
That's a lot of movies. I mean,
We've
Disney
made
I just feel like
381
that
podcasts, so fuck
That's
off Disney.
true. Walt Disney animated features have only been around for like 70 years.
I guess I just feel like there's like hundreds of Disney, like cartoon Disney movies.
So I mean, like this is like the flagship studio, right? Things like a Goofy movie or all the sequel, like direct to DVD sequels or whatever, they don't count in like that like canon list, right? That they keep. Like this is like the flagship studio, not like any of the like ones that they have in like Europe or Korea, or like where they have all their like animation sweatshops that they crank out the other stuff. But anyway, Encanto is the 60th feature, and it is basically, I feel like you're going to have the same reaction to this movie that you would have had to any of the recent Disney animated features, because it has a lot of the same problems, which is that on the positive end, the animation looks really nice in a kind of um, blandly, maybe bland is not the wrong. It's like colorful and vibrant animation, CGI animation that is not 100% photorealistic, but is like definitely really pays attention to the details of things in the sense of wanting to make them have like some sort of realistic verisimilitude, which, to be fair, has been like Disney's thing since like the like 40s. Um, but it's taken them a while for like the CGI animation to catch up with that, and so it looks nice, but it looks like it's made with the same sort of artistic intent and vision as like probably the last like five animated features, right? And the characters kind of all like look the same way as those other characters and stuff like that, and so it looks nice in the sense that the rest of the Disney movies of the last few years have been looking nice, but it's not really pushing the boundaries aesthetically. Um, and then on the more definitively negative side, the screenplay is just trash. Like it is just so like I don't understand like why it's so hard for Disney to make a screenplay that hangs together like as a whole. Like it doesn't even have to be like a amazing screenplay. It could just be a screenplay that functions as a movie rather than like
What's the story
oh
of
yeah, yeah,
it?
yeah. So that would probably be helpful. So the story is there is this family who live in what's probably Colombia. I think like from what I've heard. And there's like a flashback at the beginning of the movie where the family or the grandmother is like a young mother in the flashback, and she and her husband have to flee their home because it's being overtaken by like some soldiers. Um, and while they're fleeing, the soldiers catch up to them, and the husband gets killed by the soldiers. But like in the place where he's killed, this candle kind of materializes and becomes this like magical totem that protects the grandmother and like creates these huge mountains around her. And so they have like this valley where they're protected from the dangers outside, and also the candle gives them all magical powers. And so all as the family grows, um, inside this like enclaved valley, they all get magical powers. So like one of them super strong, and one of them can see the future, and one of them is like able to shoot flowers and make pretty things grow and stuff. But at the time that the movie starts, like the plot of the movie starts, one of the daughters has been she didn't get a magical gift, and so she's like unmagical, and so she has a lot of angst about this, and her family honestly treats her pretty terribly about it. Like she's ostracized within her family because she doesn't have powers, you know, because everyone else has cool powers, and then other people start losing their powers, and it's kind of like a mystery to figure out, like, well, what's happening to our magic candle, and why can't we have powers anymore, and stuff like that. And so it's not like a terrible like premise. Like it's interesting. Like the setting is unique. It's like essentially like a single setting movie. Like it's all set in this really small valley, mostly in this house that the magic candle has built. Um, and it ends up the whole thing ends up being this metaphor. Like the magic ends up being like a metaphor for like like the health of the family and how well they treat each other, and basically like as family members like internalize trauma, and as family members um, like begin to like have rifts with one another that they can't talk about because the grandmother is very intense, like she's very authoritarian. It's like causing the house to like literally start shaking and crumbling, and their magic to go away. And so it's like all like a metaphor for like the family. And so like that element of it is nice, and it's like a good idea, but the movie is just it just struggles to tell this story. And part of this is the same old like Disney problems, which honestly like Disney has been plagued with for decades. It's not like a new thing, but it seems to have reared its head again in full force, especially over the last few movies, in which like all of their movies like lack internal consistency. You have like threads, like plot threads that are just dropped. You have like weird reveals that aren't really seated later on. You have just like weird dead ends in the narrative that you're not sure why they're there. And like even some of the more popular Disney movies recently have had this problem. Like Frozen has like the random like trolls stuff where it's like, why is this even in the movie? And this is like that, like even more so. But then another part of it is I'm not 100% sure the movie really understands the family dynamics that it establishes, because what it establishes at the beginning of the movie is a deeply toxic family, like a family that's like borderline psychologically abusive toward the daughter who doesn't have gifts. And then by the end of the movie, everyone has gotten the chance to tell their stories and their own internalized like traumas and insecurities, and they just kind of hug it out. And I was kind of left thinking like, what okay, that's really nice that they're able to mend things, but none of this solves the problem that is depicted at the beginning of the movie, which is that this girl is ostracized and has, like, for what seems like a decade, because it's been that long since it was known that she doesn't have powers, that she's just not been considered like on the same tier as her siblings. And hugging it out is nice, but it doesn't do anything to rectify that. Just saying like, hey, it's okay that you don't have powers. We still love you anyway. It doesn't really change that. And like the ending of the movie just does not work in proportion. Like it's just not earned given like just how awful the family is in the opening like 30 minutes. And I wonder if that's just a miscalculation of writing. Like they don't really understand like how awful the family comes across, at least to me. So I don't know. I thought it was like okay. I'm complaining a lot because it's really easy to complain about this movie because it's pretty dysfunctional. But
No. So I'm looking at this now. I know we had talked about this a couple months ago, but it looks like this movie has the exact same problem that Raya and the Last Dragon had, which is there are literally 6 fucking writers on this movie. And so like what you're like the whole thing that you're describing reminds me of watching that Raya movie, which is another movie that like the central story is fine, but there's so many different things that they're also like tossing to you at once, and it seems like this might be it's only 2 movies, but this seems to be kind of a trend where Disney is like workshopping these things to such a extravagant extent that you have 6 writers on it, and it's just like utter nonsense with Lin-Manuel Miranda songs.
Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that
it.
Lin-Manuel Miranda wrote the songs in this movie, which the songs are fine.
He also wrote some of the story, I guess. I'm looking.
Yeah,
but I don't know. Like this just seems to be. I'm just pointing. It seems like this might be a trend where they're starting to like make these like literally like TV writer rooms for these movies, and it's just gonna become hogwash 6 writer bullshit every movie.
I think like that is a little bit of a problem. Disney's always had that approach. There's like only a few movies that are like, oh, we just have one director and like 2 writers or something like that. Like a lot of Disney movies are like very collaborative, to the point where if you look at like something like Pinocchio, like there's not a director for the movie, right? There's like 5 different people because they're all supervising different things. But I think that the problem recently is that Disney is just intent on its movies being about something significant. Whereas like if you look at like, I don't know, like Mulan or something like that, or like Sleeping Beauty, like those are movies that have a lot of the same like weird like tonal stuff where they throw in like random comedic stuff that kind of like feels like a dead end or something. But it kind of all fits together better because those movies don't have these really grand thematic ambitions where it's like this movie is about trauma or this movie is about like reparations for indigenous peoples or like whatever, like and it's not to say that there's not like themes in those movies, but those movies don't like explicitly foreground like some sort of important social or psychological issue most of the time. And so they work kind of as like objects of wonder a lot better than these new Disney movies, which are like just intent on being like serious topics. And I'm not against serious topics, but if you can't handle them better on like a screenwriting level, like I would rather you make these kind of like fragmented movies just be fun from moment to moment without being disappointing on a thematic level. Like just make a fun movie without themes that you're trying to foreground. maybe, if you can't do the themes right.
Yeah, they aim too high, for sure, and they can't handle it.
Right, and I don't know, and I want animation to be like an art form where people can do ambitious and serious things, but it just feels like Disney and their creative process is not up to the task of doing those things at the moment. And like, I mean, they have movies that tackle serious topics with nuance in the past, but it's been a while since they've been able to do that in a way that doesn't feel on some level hollow. It's like, not that I hate like a lot of like all the recent Disney movies, but a lot of times, like when you scrutinize the script or rewatch them a billion times, like you have to when you have kids, it just becomes apparent that like the screenplay just falls apart, like wet paper or something like that. Where if you handle it too much, it just comes apart. Um, and if it's something like Winnie the Pooh, where they're just like having fun, whimsical stuff, it doesn't matter. It's like, well, I can still enjoy these moments. But when it's something like this, where it's like attempting to talk about family trauma and like the ways in which like internalizing conflict like literally tears families apart. Like that's a serious thing to be talking about. And so when the movie script starts falling apart upon inspection, that theme just feels like a leaden weight in the middle of the movie that the movie can't support.
It's kind of like Shrek 3 and how it was all about like the woes of becoming a father, but then as you're watching it, it's sort of like why is this in Shrek 3? Like why did we need this? Like why couldn't we just watch the funny big green boy like get into trouble again? Like why did we need to?
Well, I think not to start in on this again, but like I think that Disney has like really prioritized, to Michael's point, like making these movies say something about something, and that something is generally people who have normally been ignored by the Disney Corporation. So people of color, indigenous people, things like that, where they're like trying to incorporate those stories into these big blockbuster giant movies, which is fine. But at the end of the day, if the movie fucking sucks, what good is your representation? If it's like, we're representing these people of color in a shitty, like,
they're still trying
now
to
they
make
get
it
a
like
shitty
a
movie too. Like
production that is marketed to like white families, like ideally, like, which is like this weird sort of like it can't go anywhere. Like
the movie is like low key like a Gabriel Garcia Marquez like tribute, like not 100%, but there's a lot of stuff that kind of feels like it's trying to do that, like the multi-generational family and the kind of magical realist stuff, like, but by making those connections, it just makes it feel even more hollow because it's not tied to the cultural specificity of like 100 Years of Solitude or something like that. And I guess the frustrating thing for something like Encanto or a lot of the most recent Disney movies is the sense that the dysfunction of the movie isn't like an inherent function of the movie. Like it just feels like had they just workshopped it a little bit more, like it could have been something kind of special. Like there are some like genuinely interesting things in like the setting and like the way that the family is structured, like that have potential that just aren't served well by the movie, but also don't feel like the movie had to turn out this way. It's not like these are baked in problems with the movie. It's like that the movie just executes things just not very satisfactorily, and they could have, I imagine, maybe this is me just, couch quarterbacking this, but it doesn't seem like that the screenwriting problems would have derailed the production had they simply sat down and just like figured it out instead of just like, I don't know, producing something that has all these like shaggy ends and doesn't cohere. Because like I said, the animation is fine and fine to look at and serves the movie well. The premise is fine. Like the overall arc makes like theoretical sense. It's just like on a moment by moment basis, the movie doesn't provide narrative that connects to the other places in a way that satisfies. And that just feels like a workshop problem to me more than like the Disney Corporation doesn't know how to, talk about people of color necessarily. It's just like they didn't try hard enough.
Well, that's what I'm getting at. Like it's not it's not a bad thing to try to do that, but if you're just going to workshop it to hell and you're going to just kind of run on the aesthetics going like look at it like it looks like what you're supposed to want, then I'm like, yeah, you're not really trying that hard. You're just you're looking at the numbers and you're seeing there's a lot of Latino families going to the movies, so you're going to put something on screen so that it'll get them their butts in seats. You don't give a fuck about diversity. You're just trying to score $1 at the end of the day and give us a shitty movie. So like, fuck you with your diversity. Go throw it in the trash.
That is
Disney.
true. I will say, to end on a positive note, so I went to a little girl's birthday party with my son, which was where we went to the movie and saw this, and the kids were riveted. Like, this was Jarvis, my son's first time in the movie theater, and he was like sitting there, like, this movie's not short, like it's like an hour 45 or something like that, and he was sitting there like hands on the armrests, like in the same position for like 90% of that movie. And like the kids he was with were pretty into it as well, which, I mean, like, I guess that's like a low bar to clear as far as kids go, but like, it's also, this is a movie that's not really like pitched toward like the parents so much. Like, this is a movie that, like, you know, is definitely like trying to be like for the kids. And I mean, all Disney movies are like that, but this isn't like a particularly like, you know, trying to be a grown-up Disney movie. Like, it's not like whatever, Atlantis or something like that. But so the positive was seeing my son enjoy a movie theater experience, and his first movie theater experience, which was very sweet.
That's Disney gotcha.
Going to the theater with a kid, like, there's literally nothing else to see.
No, I understand. It is what it is. I don't blame you on that one. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and then we will be back talking The Prince of Egypt, which is a good animated movie.
Yes, speaking of a well-scripted movie.
Exactly, after this.
Hey, Cemetery listeners, Andrew here. At the midpoint of this week's episode, I want to direct you to some of the non-podcasty things we have to offer. First, if you're a fan of what we do, please consider supporting us on Patreon. For $5 a month, you get 3 things: a shout out at the end of every episode, the opportunity to choose a movie we cover on the show, and our Patreon exclusive podcast, Film Theory and Chill, in which we look at a piece of theory once a month, deconstruct it, and then just chill out, talking about whatever else we have going on. All Patreon support goes solely to paying our writers for their reviews that go up on our website every Monday. Also, at the bottom of cemetery.com, you can sign up for our free newsletter. Every Sunday, we send out an email with the latest podcast episode, Patreon content, and written reviews. This is perfect for those who want to keep tabs on what's happening, but might be too busy to see the posts when they go up. Before I go, one more quick thing. The easiest thing you can do to support us is to give Cemetery a rating and review on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to the show. This is quick, free, easy, and we will read your review out on the show once we get it. To recap, consider donating to our Patreon, sign up for the free newsletter, and please give us a rating and review. Thanks for listening. Let's get back to the show.
Many nights we've prayed with no proof anyone could hear. In our hearts a hopeful song we barely understood. Now we are not afraid, although we know there's much to fear. We were moving mountains long before we knew we could. There can be miracles when you believe. Though hope is frail, it's hard to kill. Who knows what miracles you can achieve when you believe.
And we're back with part 2 of episode 381 of Cinematary. In this part, we will be continuing our cinematic journey through the Bible with 1998's The Prince of Egypt. Directed by Brenda Chapman, Steve Hickner, and Simon Wells, from a script by Philip Lazabnik. The film stars Val Kilmer, Ray Fiennes, Michelle Pfeiffer, Sandra Bullock, Steve Martin, and Martin Short. In this animated retelling of the Book of Exodus, Egyptian prince Moses, upon discovering his roots as a Jewish slave, embarks on a quest to free his people from bondage. When his plea is denied by his brother Ramesses, the new pharaoh, a series of horrific plagues strike Egypt. Moses finally leads the Israelites to freedom by parting the Red Sea and drowning the Egyptian army. God then gives Moses the Ten Commandments, a list of rules for his people to live by. Jeffrey Katzenberg had frequently suggested an animated adaptation of the 1956 film The Ten Commandments while working for the Walt Disney Company, and he decided to put the idea into production after co-founding DreamWorks Pictures in 1994. Because the subject matter is so religiously and historically significant, biblical scholars, along with Christian, Jewish, and Muslim theologians and Arab American leaders, were brought in to consult on the film. According to Katzenberg, quote, all these leaders noted that the studio executives listened and responded to their ideas and praised the studio for reaching out for comment. I just wanted to include that fact because it reminds me of that scene in Hail Caesar where he has all the faith leaders in there.
I was definitely thinking about that because at the end of the credits they have a quote from the New Testament and they have a quote from Exodus and they have a quote from the Quran, and I was like, this is definitely like a Hail Caesar.
Yeah, like
moment.
I read that and I was just like, that just reminds me of the Hail Caesar scene. The task of creating God's voice was given to Lon Bender and the team working with the film's music composer Hans Zimmer. Quote, the challenge with that voice was to try to evolve it into something that had not been heard before. We did a lot of research into the voices that had been used for past Hollywood movies as well as for radio shows. We were trying to create something that had never been previously heard, not only from a casting standpoint, but from a voice manipulation standpoint as well. The solution was to use the voice of actor Val Kilmer to suggest the kind of voice we hear inside our own heads in our everyday lives, as opposed to the larger-than-life tones with which God has been endowed in prior cinematic incarnations. The Prince of Egypt was banned in the Maldives, Malaysia, and Egypt, all state Islam countries, on the grounds that Islamic prophets, who include Moses, are not to be visually depicted. The film was also banned in Indonesia, but was later released in video CD format. In 1998, the Washington Post said the movie's proudest accomplishment is that it revises our version of Moses towards something more immediate and believable, more humanly knowable. In 1998, the LA Times said the 400-member-strong Prince of Egypt team have created a succession of visual wonders. And in 1998, Roger Ebert said, the Prince of Egypt addresses a different place in the moviegoer's mind, one where vision, imagination, and dream are just barely held and reigned by the story. One imagines Cecil B. DeMille had a film like this in his mind before he had to reduce it to reality. So on that note, let's talk a little bit about the Prince of Egypt. I'd seen this before, but I think this is the first time in a long time that I'd sat and watched it from beginning to end. Michael, what's your history with Prince of Egypt?
I watched this movie a ton when it came out. I remember going with a church group to see it in the theater, and then we had the VHS tape, which we watched quite a bit. But I probably hadn't watched it since I was 14 or 15 at the latest. It had been a long time since I saw this movie. And I was surprised at how good it was. I remembered it being good, and I had heard other adults say that it was good, which is why I wanted it to be included in this series. But I was really taken with it. I think it has some problems that we can get into later, but those are largely problems of genre, of it being a 90s family film. But for a 90s family film, man, this goes for it, man. I remember this in my head, but as a child, this just seemed it's the Moses story. But as an adult, I'm honestly shocked that they include not one but both of the infanticide sequences that are in the Book of Exodus story. They do not sand off at all the radical politics that are kind of implicit in the story. They are really hardcore. There's never any stupid there's the Pocahontas Disney movie that's about the European settlers come over, and that movie has to like equivocate. It was like, well, there are good people on both sides, and like they both considered each other savages, and so that's why there was dysfunction in the New World or whatever. And like this movie never like puts on the like never treats the story with like that sort of like easy like centrist lens. Like it's always like the pharaohs are an oppressive force that are subjugating people, and like Ramesses gets humanity, but he never gets absolution for what he does, as essentially like a orchestrating like mass genocide and slavery. And I was surprised like just how clear-eyed the movie is with that whole purpose of like liberation, because like as we can probably get into later, I mean the Book of Exodus is like the biblical text that like grounds like any sort of radical movement that has religious like Christian or Jewish religious ties, like that, like that's like the social import of this text in the modern world, is that it is like a book that uses Christian or Jewish theology to justify radical politics. And I thought that the movie like didn't really undersell that part, which I was really surprised at.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of get that late in the film when it does not sand over the whole we're gonna go murder a bunch of kids.
Yeah, God's angel of death
about
still kills all the kids, and you see the kids die.
You see like the kids' arms and shit. You're like, oh my god.
Even thinking about like the burning bush scene, where Moses gets the message from God, and God is like, okay, so here's the deal. You're going to go to Egypt, you're going to free all the Hebrews. And Moses is like, why me? And God's like, whatever, it doesn't matter. Also, listen, they're not going to listen to you, so I am going to just kill all of them, but it's going to be fine. But he's like, but you're going to use my staff to do wonders, but the wonders are like tons of people are gonna die and get boils and frogs, and like I'm just gonna wreck their shit, but it's wonders. And you see like all this like magical lights glowing and stuff. I feel like as a kid I watched that and I was like, yeah, God, thank you. And then going back and watching it and seeing that arm flopping scene and all this stuff, it goes hard. And it's also, I think,
right. Well, and it doesn't undersell the tensions that are inherent in the text. Like that's all there in the text of like the Bible is God is like this supposed to be benevolent force who causes all sorts of death and destruction in the interest of like achieving like the aims of preserving the people of like the Hebrews.
And it does do a good job of showcasing Moses. Like it's a burden for him, like as much as like, yeah, I think me as a kid brought that baggage of like, cool, we're beating up the Egyptians, but like it does a great job of showing the Hebrews like really despairing and like a sort of bittersweet feeling even when they're leaving the gates of Egypt, of like, we only did this like by like God's will and like the things that God had to do like to buy our way out of here, which was blood, like through blood and stuff, which is not a happy story necessarily.
Yeah, there's like that scene right before all the firstborn of Egypt get killed where Moses is like more or less like begging like Ramesses, like, please let us go, like, because I do not want like more of this to go on. And like in the Bible, and maybe it's just like the old-fashioned text or whatever, there is a sort of like rote pattern to the like the plagues, right, where you get like there's a plague of flies, and then Moses is like, let my people go, and then Pharaoh's like, no, and then Moses is like, okay, here's the plague of locusts, and like all that. And like in the movie, like when every time Moses says like, let my people go, like he is like there's a real emotional undercurrent to that where he doesn't want Pharaoh to say no, not just because he wants his people to be free, but also he doesn't want the Egyptians to be destroyed any further. Like like I agree with you, Seth. It shows a really great job of like that it's like a burden to bring upon the land of Egypt like pestilence and plague.
Jesse, had you seen Prince of Egypt before?
Yeah, I think, well, like Michael, and I think Seth even mentioned it too. It was one of those movies I grew up on. I didn't realize it came out in '98, so it came out when I was only 4. And I feel like I just always remember this movie being in my life. I don't know how frequently I watched it, but I definitely will, like, have always remembered all the music from the movie. I feel like the music is very iconic and very, very well done. I think it's very emotionally effective.
Whitney Houston. I had no idea. That's wild.
And Mariah Carey.
They did a really good job making music. It's not just like catchy tunes like a Disney movie. I think that they're just very beautiful, like almost hymns. But I mean, some of them are. Some of them are kind of more worship songs, or some of them are really more like kind of powerful. I don't know, like, yeah, God, all awe-inspiring, powerful kind of music, like the song that plays during the plague. Something that thus saith the Lord, like, it's just so I don't know, that for me was probably the thing that's always really resonated with me growing up with that movie, is remembering that music and feeling like it was just so well done.
The music reminds me of
a lot of the vibe,
like the Disney
Yeah.
movie in the 90s,
Yeah, I
if
can
you
see
remember that, because that's like the one Disney movie that like goes hard for like serious like religiously themed music. And like honestly, this movie in a lot of ways reminds me of that movie, just in terms of like the seriousness of its subject
Yeah, it's like
matter.
Lion King and Notre Dame, kind of.
It's kind of wild. Well, you said DreamWorks it was DreamWorks, right? Was founded in what, 94, and then they made this in 98. And so I don't know what they were known for before this, but it's
The
kind
Road to El Dorado.
this was their first. Well, that El Dorado was way later though. No, it's kind of crazy that they, if this was their start, that their first movie that they had a major hit success on was this very like Christian themed movie, and then after that they had, you know, Shrek and The Road to El Dorado, and all kinds of stuff now. But
It was funny because like, so this was the first non-Disney movie to like make a bunch of money non-Disney animated movie to make a bunch of money at the box office, but then like it changed like 2 years later because Chicken Run took that, and then Shrek took it over from there, so yeah, I mean, it's just kind of like, I think it was also, it was kind of Disney adjacent, but also
right,
not Disney.
Katzenberg got
But I
kicked
mean,
out of Disney,
Katzenberg
right?
and all
Disney or something like that. Yeah,
he got kicked out, and a lot of the animators came from Disney, so that's why it's very Disney adjacent, more so than like Shrek or Chicken Run or some of those.
yeah, I could see that it being kind of Disney adjacent, in the structure and the music and stuff.
I agree with Jesse that the real part of it is, like, regardless of how you feel about the feeling, the themes and everything, like, the songs are really showing up and bringing it, like, which is, if you're making like such a music forward film where they're like, it's like full on, like, these animated characters are singing, like, and it's like, it is a musical, like, the songs are really important and they really show up with these songs.
well, and also, like, it's not just like, because some animated musicals are just like collections of songs, but like the songs like are interplayed with each other. Like you have like reprised like versions of the songs later in the movie that have like different thematic resonance. You have like there's, I can't remember in which song, but there's like one song where they like play some of the music or some of the like notes from another song. Like, it's like not just they wrote one song after another, but they wrote the songs in concert with one another, which I think is really cool.
Oh yeah, they have like arguments. There's like that "Thus say the Lord" and the like "All I Ever Wanted," and like the Moses and Ramesses are like arguing with
They
these
got this
two
like
songs.
chorus
or
that's
something.
just like
that's
chanting,
so awesome.
like da 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 saith the-" It's just like so intense. Yeah, it's got all those things wrapped up. It's not like a Disney sing along kind of fun music at sometimes. It's really,
No, it feels much more like Broadway. I mean, like there's there's an influence from Broadway, like in Disney musicals, but there's also kind of like more. It's a little bit more playful. This one seems like a more like Broadway-esque
Just listen to
production
this. Don't
that's
sing
animated.
along to this. Just fucking listen.
I will say, like, that, like, there are parts of the movie that don't quite square with that. Like, I mentioned the Hunchback of Notre Dame earlier, which is, like, notorious for, like, basically being, like, an adult-oriented masterpiece, like, destroyed by its comic relief that just, like, is just mars the movie. And I don't think this movie is quite that bad, but this definitely has moments where you can feel the movie, like, shifting gears from this, like, bigger story, like this bigger ambition into, well, we gotta like do some stuff for like the cheap seats. Like I never thought that the like Egyptian priests worked, who are like Steve Martin and is it Martin Short or something like that. Like they
Which
feel
is a
like
shame. They're
Yeah.
kind of squandered.
they feel like that they're flown in from a different movie, and like as like a way to appease the like expectations of like a 90s animated like family movie, in the same way that like the gargoyles and the Hunchback of Notre Dame are like just a complete like aberration from like what the rest of the movie's ambition is. And I think, like I said, it's not quite as like awful as like having George Costanza voice one of the gargoyles, but like it's the same sort of effect where there are parts of the movie that feel kind of like they're sticking out and don't quite fit with what is overall a very serious and very, very epic and like fairly adult oriented
I
movie.
was listening to that, or I was watching the movie earlier, and it got to that "Playing with the Big Boys Now" song, and
That's the one song that doesn't work.
I think I hadn't even realized who the cast was for the movie, and then and then I was kind of looking over it because maybe I was looking at Friends reviews, and I realized it was Martin Short and or Steve Martin and Martin Short, who voiced those characters, and so they were doing that scene, and I feel like I was thinking about that scene because it always kind of was just sat weird with me, and I realized it's almost like a secondhand embarrassment I'm feeling because I feel like they're trying to make that scene like intimidating, like they're trying to make these characters seem kind of, oh, you better watch out. But first of all, playing with the big boys now, like you're supposed to make me feel intimidated by that phrase in particular, and then just the way that they do it, like maybe they are trying to make those characters look embarrassing, like, yeah, look at these turds, like God is way cooler, isn't he? Or maybe they were trying to make that scene and it like intimidating, kind of scary scene, but it doesn't land at all. I feel like I've always felt embarrassed, and it just totally makes sense now, especially knowing who they cast for that it was just really just played more as goofy to me than anything.
I do think for me a lot of the voices are the weak link in the movie, and not just because they're white people for the most part playing Egyptians and Semitic, like Hebrews from the Middle East, but also, like, I just think sometimes they're distracting. Like Jeff Goldblum as Aaron. Like, I don't
Weird
know.
energy,
like,
yes.
it's weird. Yeah, like it took me out at times.
Ralph Fiennes, I was really pleased by, though. I don't know. There was something that he really brought to it, and
He
kind of, I don't know. I didn't really know or think about it until I like looked it up, like by the end, and I thought he disappeared into it just right.
One thing that I thought was really interesting was this movie very much kind of runs under the assumption that you kind of know the plot beats of the Book of Exodus. Like I don't remember this from watching it when I was younger, but like, and it's not a bad thing, but it really doesn't spend too much time like digging into like the deeper, like it focuses more on like the personal rather than the kind of what you would assume would be the like big showy moments. Like a lot of the the plagues just come kind of in a montage. It's like you have a couple where like Moses interacts with it, but for the most part they just kind of toss it in a montage. And there's a couple. I mean, even like the Ten Commandments happens very like unengagingly, like.
It's like thrown into the like honestly like you could have ended the movie when the Red Sea.
Kind of hilarious.
But I mean, I don't know. What did you all make of that? Because it also opens up the movie to kind of just really like flex its animated muscle, because a lot of those montages and things like that are just so wonderfully rendered that like it kind of makes for an interesting movie because it's much more interested in like the personal and like these really beautiful animated flourishes rather than following like step by step what the Bible would say.
I was gonna say, I liked how they would do, like when Moses was originally figuring out, like putting all the pieces together of who he really was, and they depicted all that through the hieroglyphics and kind of animating the hieroglyphics. And that was the only time in the movie that they really do that, but I thought that was just a really interesting way to sort of break up the animation style and do something different and also kind of keep to the tone of where it is historically. I thought that was really neat. And then I was talking to some of our friends about it, and Cam had mentioned how neat it was how they animated, I guess, the deity, God, you know, and how he kind of comes as that bush, but he's this sort of like glowing, slow-moving blue presence, and then when he comes as the Holy Ghost and goes through the town and takes all the firstborn, the way they just sort of do this like wisping, but it's scary too, because it should be scary.
It's silent too. It's completely silent. Like neither of those scenes, like the burning bush scene has music in it, which makes it a little louder, but neither of them have God like making any sound except like a voice in the burning bush. Like it's all very, very quiet, which is like unsettling in both scenes, but especially in the like killing the firstborn scene.
I did find it pretty hilarious that like Zach said, like they are definitely almost humorously, so like almost in a confused way, like leaning on the fact that you know the book of Exodus. Because like if you don't know the book of Exodus, like the ending, and it seems like kind of like misguided. Like the ending is kind of hilarious because he just like he has the, you know, the whole thing is he goes up Mount Sinai or whatever, and he comes down and he has his big old 10 commandments, and he walks down and he sees that like I'm going to give them the 10 commandments and we're going to, you know, be God's people. And then he walks down and he sees they're having like a crazy like orgy and making a giant idol and shit. They do not show you that. They just show him. He just
see
stops
him standing
and he's
on
like,
the mountain.
"Oh shit."
That's what I think is so funny about the movie is that they depict this whole thing like, yeah, God's he's kind of scary badass, but like he's on the good side and he loves these people and he just doesn't want slavery anymore. Like he wants to lead them to safety. And then like 2 days later they go out there, Moses gets mad for a second and like hits a rock instead of like touches it, and then God's like, fuck you and all the rest of you, I'm done with y'all, you can die.
40 years in the
You
wilderness,
can go die in the desert now. He's like, I rescued you, you got mad for a second, I'm done with all y'all.
It is really funny. We talked about this in Noah too, but like every like redemptive moment in the Torah is like immediately followed by like everything just going to hell again. Like after, you know, the world is made new after the flood in Noah, then you have like the Tower of Babel immediately after that. Like it's like the next story. And then in this one, like you said, like they're freed from the Egyptians and they're like, yay, but then immediately they're like worshiping the golden calf and then like hitting rocks and stuff and getting put in the wilderness for 40 years. Like it is like funny in a
They
way.
don't show you any of that though. They're just like, see, isn't God, I mean, scary, like we can all agree, but like also awesome. And then
Yeah, I mean, this is where, I don't really know what to say about it necessarily. I don't know where I swing, because like part of me, like the great thing about this is that there is a universal sort of lesson that everybody can really get behind, and there are themes that everybody can get behind, and then the real separator is when like in a scene like Playing with the Big Boys Now, not only is the song bad, it's like the whole contention swings way more into like how the audience lands theologically, which is like, isn't polytheism dumb? Like aren't pagans silly and stupid, and like there's just one God, isn't having one God better? Which is like really like all of a sudden it is no longer like a universal like kind of situation going on. They are now like very much sticking to their guns as like telling this as a Christian story, which again, part of me appreciates the consistency there, that they're like, I mean, at the end of the day, this is the story of Moses. This is like, we shouldn't be like packaging this as anything less, but like that is where it kind of like swings in this sort of like, well, now you're showing your cards and I'm like ready to argue with you or something.
I do think one of the interesting things in this movie, and this doesn't really get rid of that like uneasiness you're talking about, but like the way that like the religion of the court exists as a way to prop up the existing social order, right? Like the like empire of Egypt, like the subjugation of like the Hebrews is um is like justified under religious terms in the movie. And like when Moses comes to say let my people go, the first response is the like religion of the state saying like, well, hey, our religion's cool too, and in fact better than yours, and that's why the status quo needs to stay in place, which I think is like interesting in the movie. But also what's interesting about it is that like Christianity has served as that role in countless times in history, you know. Like if you go to, I mean, the most obvious way in which like the story of Moses has been used in American history is in the context of the civil rights movement and then the like abolitionist movement, right? And in both cases, Christianity was the, you know, more or less the religion of the oppressor, in addition to like the story being told to free slaves as well. Like, and like I think it's just really fascinating that like religion, like the way that this movie depicts it, which I think like, I don't know, I feel like it would have been weird to not like to have been sympathetic to the Egyptians in a sort of like meaningful way, but also the way in which the Egyptian religion is kind of critiqued in the movie is a critique many people level against, like, I don't know about necessarily Judaism since that's been like fairly marginalized, but like at least in America, like Christianity has served the role that the Egyptian gods did in the movie.
I had a coworker, so we have a mask mandate now in our school system, which is a good thing, and but it was we didn't start, the school year did not start with one. We got one sort of in the middle of the school year or a few months in, and people did not respond well to it, especially in the very rural schools that I work in, which are also like predominantly full of pretty evangelical staff members. And I was walking down the hallway. We had an in-service day right as they enforced that mask mandate, just to kind of reconvene and kind of talk through like, okay, what's our plan on Monday when these kids show up or whatever. And I could hear, like, I was walking down the hallway and I heard one staff member like comparing our mask mandate in our school system to the Jews in Egypt. All that, oh yeah, sorry, yeah, that does barely has anything to do with this movie, but I just got it, like, we're talking about how, you know, at one point these were genuinely oppressed people, and now, like, I feel like Christians like to see themselves as really, really oppressed people, and like they're the predominant religious group in the country, and all of our most of our laws are based off of Christian values.
Christians are Pharaoh.
Also,
like,
they're Gentiles.
This drives me crazy that
you're not Jew.
Yeah, like most Christians are not, you know,
right.
You can't borrow
anyway,
that.
But like also like this drives me crazy, and maybe this is like just a rabbit trail soapbox or whatever. But like when white middle class American Christians read the Bible, which is more or less like exclusively a book that came out of like marginalized people, right? Even like the parts of the Bible that are about like King David and like when like the glory of Israel and stuff, like that was written by people who were probably like in exile in Babylon or Assyria, you know, so they were kind of like, you know, using that as like, you know, resistance literature or something like that anyway. But like Christians in America, like the people who are at the driver's seat of an empire, read themselves into the Bible not as the Egyptians, not as the Romans, not as like the like religious leaders of power in the New Testament or whatever, but always as like the oppressed like Jews. And I think it is so offensive to read the Bible in that way, because like ultimately, like when you look at even in this movie doesn't sugarcoat it. Like you see like statues, like there are multiple like tableaus of like the statues that the statues and buildings that the Egyptians have built to themselves, celebrating themselves, but were built with slaves. And like I think that it is like impossible as an American to look at that and not find like parallels there. Like, you know, that we had slaves build the White House. We had slaves build, like enslaved people like build monuments to the American Empire. And like, if you watch this story and identify with the like oppressed people, you better be an oppressed person, because otherwise like you got the wrong message out of the story. Because like, I don't. It's just so sick that Christians have this like idea of that they're persecuted minority when they are the people who are literally like bludgeoning people of color or lower classes or whatever. You know, if you're promoting capitalism, you are the Pharaoh in this movie. Like if you are you know, promoting a police state, if you're promoting like, you know, police brutality or like defending police brutality, like you are the Pharaoh in this movie. Like he does all of those things in this movie, and somehow
The healthy way of reading this as like a Christian on top now is to see that like we are in the Egyptians, like we are now in a place of power, and look how power corrupts, right? And it's like that, if anything, that's how a Christian audience should see this.
You know, and it's really interesting. So I was watching it. Like I said, the music has always been what really I always really took most away from the movie, and it's something that it's a movie that I've always known about my whole life. I can remember watching this movie, and I remember as I was listening to it again today, or watching it again today, that's still what stuck to me. This like weird chilled like feeling of like love and familiarity as I was watching it, and I haven't really identified as a Christian, and I haven't really identified as spiritual in many years now, but still like something about kind of rewatching that kind of brought some of that feeling back to me. And I guess I don't know, now I'm hearing an echo. So watching stuff like this, like you almost get a glimpse of maybe what when I was younger I hoped Christianity was or could be, and I never got to experience it, but I still feel like I really enjoy talking to Christians who never really gave up but learned to deconstruct. I didn't even recognize that as a term until like earlier this year, the deconstructing of Christianity, like as a former evangelical to somebody who views it in a totally different way. I didn't even know like that was a term. I just didn't know. I felt like there was either an either or. Either you are or you aren't an evangelical. But seeing a movie like this, or even just kind of having this discussion, you realize like the reason that I pulled away and haven't quite figured out whether or not I want to go back or deconstruct or become something, a different version of that, is because I feel like there's so much that there could be in the faith that is just so lost in like our mainstream culture. Does that all make sense?
One thing that struck me when I was watching the movie this time, and I remembered this part of the movie, but I guess I didn't really like it didn't hit me in this way before. But so Moses, like, you know, he kills a man in Egypt, and so he runs away to escape the law, basically. Even though like the movie makes it clear that his privilege would have protected him from the law, which I think again like is wild that the movie just like goes there. But he ends up like in the land of Midian, and like I think another part of the movie that doesn't work super well is his wife is a super underdeveloped character, and that's where he meets his wife, or I guess he's met his wife before. But regardless, there's a whole song where that is sung by his father-in-law, or who becomes his father-in-law, that is kind of like the song in which it's like kind of the "Can You Feel the Love Tonight" in this movie, in which you see
it's
like
better
the kind
though,
of
I think.
it's way better, but you see like the courtship of Moses with Zipporah, his you know, love interest or whatever. It's a great montage, but one of the things I was doing was listening to the lyrics of the song, which like the chorus is about looking at life through heaven's eyes, but then the verses are about like what looking at life through heaven's eyes means, and what it presents is it's basically decolonizing Moses. Like it's talking about how like the world through heaven's eyes is like there is no like hierarchy based on economics or ethnicity. It's like honestly like communism. Like it's like it talks about like sharing resources and stuff like that. Like that's what the song is about as Moses is falling in love with this woman. Which again, I don't think the romance is super well developed, but like it presents like a basically utopian vision of what faith can be, which is that God should be like a belief in God should be an equalizer, right? If you believe in a supreme being, that kind of puts all human accomplishment on like a earthly pedestal that is egalitarian, because we should all our like the hierarchy should be toward God rather than amongst humans. I don't know, that really struck me in this movie because like this movie is about like power and coercion, and how people escape power and coercion, and that whole like sequence is like presenting like a utopian alternative that I thought was again like wild. I never really thought about the movie in that way when I was
forgot about that. That is a really strong aspect of this that I feel like I get that it's supposed to be like Moses and God and they are the ones that are pushing this forward, but I kind of wanted to know more like about these like people that are just on the outskirts that are like communist, like utopian, like who are they? And they're like making it work, and they like are, you know, very clearly displaying like a system that doesn't require slavery to.
I was kind of thinking he should just like take the Hebrews and just take them over there. Like that town seemed like it was pretty chill. Why didn't he have to go through the whole ocean and everything?
He shouldn't be undersold that he probably learned some lessons about what's wrong about Egypt from them, you know?
He's kind of Moses is kind of a drama bitch, and so he's like, look at the water, and then like the water parts, and they're like, oh my gosh, you know, it's
fair.
It's more of like the
all
presentation,
they have is like
you know,
tents in the desert, you know, not as impressive.
Yeah. Any closing thoughts as we wrap up? I mean, Prince of Egypt gets slaps, you know, it's good stuff.
It's really, really beautiful. I think it's just a very, very well done movie. Also, I just thought it was funny, like, watching this one. And then I didn't watch Noah. Was it Noah last week or the week before? I didn't watch it, but I caught, like, I think I watched, like, the first 30 minutes and then kind of was in and out after that. But just seeing, thinking about how Noah seems like, a total lunatic, and B, like, a total dickhead. And in this movie, they're like, oh no, Moses, he's like totally like relatable. He's really kind of reconciling with it, but he's a good guy. But I think like probably Noah is a more representation of what most of these Bible dudes were like, which was like total lunatic dickheads.
Zealot.
Well, yeah, because Moses is literally in a corner sharpening his kid-killing knife.
God wants me to do this.
For a good part of the movie.
My grandkids.
So he's like, I'm sorry.
Yeah. My final thought is the one thing that they left out that's in Exodus that I wish they had, that would have just made it, just completed the trifecta of like making a movie with like radical subtext, is like, so in the Exodus story, as the Hebrews are leaving Egypt, but before they've escaped with the Red Sea and all that, there's a passage that no one ever talks about, unless you're talking about like James Cone or like a liberation theologian, which is the plundering of Egypt. So like as the Hebrews are liberated from slavery, they not only are set free, but they like rob Egypt blind. Like they take all this wealth from Egypt.
So they're looters.
It's like
and riders,
it's reparations. Like
Jeez,
it's like
yeah.
like exactly what that is. And I don't know where they would have fit that in the movie, but if they had made a way to like put that in the movie, that would have been too cool.
That would have been nice, you know. Been a nice little addition, I think. They could have added it.
They're like, wow, we're
had a nice little song and a montage.
We just killed all your kids. Let's take your
reparations.
Well, that'll wrap up this episode of Cinematary. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/cinematary, on Twitter and Instagram at handle @cinematary, and on Letterboxd at letterboxd.com/cinematary, where we list all the movies that we talked about in this episode. Head over to, if you'd like to support the podcast, head to patreon.com/cinematary. Thank you to our patrons: Cam, Chad Newsom, Corey Willingham, Harry Eskin, Candace Sisson, Ron Hayes, Tyler Chandler, and Whitney Rio Ross. Thank you so much for your patronage. Next week, we're going to continue our cinematic journey through the Bible with 1964's Gospel According to St. Matthew. So stick around for that. But until next week, thank you guys for listening. We'll see you then.